Good morning. We gather on this solemn of occasions on the territory of Lekwungen-speaking people, the Saugis and Esquimalt First Nation. We thank them for their stewardship of these lands since time immemorial. I want to thank MLA Simons for his moving performance this morning. We join people in British Columbia and around the world today in observing Yom Ha'Shoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. We're all honored today by the presence of Amalia Bo-Fishman as keynote speaker, as well as other members of the Jewish community and other communities who have faced hatred and discrimination. We gather today to remember the 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust, millions of others who were murdered because of their ethnicity, sexual identity, disability, or opposition to the Nazi regime. On this day, we stand with survivors and their families. To survivors, we honor your strength and join you in mourning those lost in the Shoah. We remember the dead and tell their stories so that their memory may be a blessing. I'd like to invite to the podium Premier David Eby to give his remarks on behalf of our government.
Thank you very much, Nikki. I'll begin by acknowledging we're on the territory of Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. Thank you to the Jewish community for assisting us in organizing this important event today. Thank you to my colleagues from all different political parties joining us here today. Thank you to the independent member, Selena Robinson, for joining us today. We are certainly very fortunate to have Amalia Bo-Fishman here to be our keynote speaker today, and I'm very grateful that you were able to join us. On Yom Ha'Shoah, we remember and we reflect on the astonishing, the horrific, the profoundly disturbing Holocaust, the deaths of 6 million people, and the complicity and the silence that enabled that to take place. And we do this for a very specific reason. It's to remember the parents, the children, the fathers, the mothers, the friends who died, and to ensure that when we say never again, we remember how it happened and how we make sure that it does not happen again. The story of Walter Rosenberg, who was the son of a couple that had a sawmill and was taken to the Auschwitz death camp. He witnessed atrocities. He saw what was happening at the camp. And he and another prisoner hid in a woodpile for 4 days and were able to escape the camp. He came to Canada and he changed his name to Rudolf Verba, and he was a witness. He shared what he saw and was one of the first direct eyewitness testimonials to the horrors of the death camps, and his warning saved surely tens of thousands of lives and helped to activate the response, the military response to the horrors of the death camps. He became a biochemist at UBC, reflecting a couple of things. One was the remarkable courage of the Jewish people in this time, and the other is their remarkable contributions to our province. Today, we mark Yom Ha'Shoah in the context of the attacks of October 7th and the largest murder of Jews since the Holocaust. And the context of that horrific attack, the violence, the indignities that were perpetrated among the most vulnerable and people who were just at a music festival. And some of the response that we heard to those horrific attacks, responses that even included people celebrating attacks on Jews, the murder of Jews, and attempting to normalize that in our society today, even knowing the history of the Holocaust. It is a situation where Jewish members of our community do not feel safe. And it is a traumatic reminder of how the Holocaust happened. That attacks on Jewish people were normalized and made acceptable and enabled. And I am grateful to live in a province where every political party stands against anti-Semitism, where there is support without exception in our legislature to stand with the Jewish people against hate every day, and where we will provide the resources that are necessary to ensure security on the ground, of course, but also that our prosecutors have the policies in place, that the police have the tools they need to address hate speech, to address hate crimes in our province, to make sure that we do not allow anti-Semitism to grow. I am very appreciative of all of you being here today, and I would like to invite up at this point Rabbi Lynn Greenoff and Amelia Bo-Fishman to receive a commemorative proclamation marking Yom Ha'Shoah in the province of British Columbia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Premier Eby. Now I'd like to welcome a representative of each official party in the legislature, as well as Selena Robinson, MLA for Coquitlam-Millardville, who many of you know and who has helped us shape the ceremony each year. In the interest of time, each member will ask the following representative to come to the podium. So I now welcome Selena to the podium. Oh, sorry, were you first? That's my apologies.
Myself being Michael Lee, the MLA for Vancouver-Langara, and the Shadow Minister for the Attorney General, Attorney General Sharma, as well as the Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation Shadow Minister. Welcome to you all here in the Hall of Honor, and to many of the members of our, I see my counterpart, the Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation there, MLA Rankin, but also Todd Stone, our House Leader for the BC United Caucus, and many of my other colleagues with the BC United Caucus, including Ben Stewart and Norm Letnick there and others. On behalf of Kevin Falcon, I certainly know that this is a very different gathering this year. And for the gentleman who greeted me in the pre-reception and said he's seen me speak year after year after year after year, as the Premier just mentioned, this is a very different time. Just over 3.5 weeks ago, with some of the leaders here, I had the opportunity to have a visit, a very meaningful and remarkable visit at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. And when I stood there in the Hall of Names with the 4.4 million records, including for yourselves and others, your family members, those who were lost in the Holocaust. And as I look down at the reflective pool, like so many visitors look, and see the reflection of all of us, we see the reflection of humanity. We remember those who were sacrificed. We continue to carry, as so many of you here today, their memories forward. And I know as I stand in the garden outside to honor the righteous among nations, that this is certainly more than ever a time where we need to continue to reach out to so many around the world, whether they're states, governments, or ourselves and other ethno-cultural religious communities and other citizens of the world, to be allies. To be the allies that stand up against acts against humanity. The dehumanization that we continue to see in so many ways, including the October 7th Hamas terrorist attack. But I know, like so many of you, who come here year after year after year after year to honor those memories. It's so important. I always thought it was important to ground us. We say, never again. Personally, I thought we had learned as a society. And I mean here in British Columbia. I mean here in our communities, on our streets, university campuses, Vancouver Art Gallery gatherings, on the streets, where so many of us continue to be targeted in ways that, as I've talked about, when I talk about the importance of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, as I just did in the House this morning, again, it's because of the memories, the lives lost. We have to learn as a society. We have to have not just the moral clarity, but the clarity. And I am troubled by that. I am troubled by the dangers of the false narrative that we continue to see in so many ways. I had the opportunity in the fall with the Leader of Official Opposition, Kevin Falcon, to visit again the Vancouver Holocaust Education Center, which is located in my riding of Vancouver-Langara. And they had an exhibition, as Nina and others who are here from VHEC, around propaganda. Propaganda, the machinery, not just of the killing machinery that was deployed in the Holocaust, but also the propaganda machinery that we continue to see today in different ways in this world. Again, the reason why we need clarity. And I know that last year when I spoke, I conveyed the words of Irwin Kotler. And we know today is about an act of remembrance, but we must remember to act. It's words that I continue to work with over the last year. I repeated those words a year ago, and I repeat them here again today, because it is a call to action for all of us, to honor the memories of those lives that have been lost. And those lives, of course, that include survivors, the Roma people, the Slavia people, the LGBTQS plus people, people with disabilities, those other lives. And I certainly saw that at the Nova Music Festival, as the Premier mentioned, the futures of these young people and others. We have to do more, and we will do more. And I know that today, as we reflect upon the memories, we will continue to reaffirm our commitment to ensure as a civil society that no member of our community, Jewish or otherwise, must feel the kind of threats and intimidation that we see on our streets and our university campuses and colleges today. We must act, and we will do that. Thank you. I will just now introduce the leader of the Green Party, the third, otherwise known as the Third Party, Sonia Furstenau.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you all. I'm honored to be with you today as we commemorate Yom Ha'Shoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. Thank you to MLA Simons for the musical piece. Thank you to Premier Eby, Attorney General Sharma, and to my fellow MLAs for their words today. Thank you to the members of the Jewish community, especially survivors, the families, descendants of survivors, for being with us today and for inviting us to participate in this memorial with you. The Holocaust is one of the darkest chapters in human history. It is a tragedy of incomprehensible scale, and it is also a very human tragedy. I think today of people lost, of stories lost, of families torn apart, the connection between peoples and land severed. The enduring impact of this is still visible throughout the world. And the Holocaust is a scar on our collective humanity, and we must commit to ensuring that this harm is never perpetuated again. The Holocaust holds many lessons for all of us, of not allowing hatred or dehumanizing language, of asking questions of leaders and avoiding populism, of the importance between connections and communities, of connections between communities. We must all play an active role and an active part in learning and understanding this history as part of our role in making sure never again. I am pleased and I applaud the government for committing to including Holocaust history in the school curriculum. The history of the 20th century shapes the world and the conflicts that we are in today, and we need to ensure that every child knows that history and knows how to participate in a positive and constructive way in our own political system. A deep understanding of our political and governance systems and how to be that active and positive participant in a healthy democracy that protects human rights is a part of that role. As a teacher, for me, it was always a priority to invite Holocaust survivors or descendants of Holocaust survivors to my classrooms every year that I taught. It was important for me as a teacher that this was what my students learned every year. A shared foundational knowledge of our history, an understanding of our past, and a commitment to walking forward together are crucial parts of our collective future. Only when we fully know and can understand and process our past can we be said to have lived up to the promise that we have made to never let this happen again. I will now introduce the MLA Bruce Banman from the BC Conservative Party.
Ladies and gentlemen, today as we observe the Holocaust Remembrance Day, Yom Ha'Shoah, we are compelled to confront not only the horrors of the past, but also the troubling rise of anti-Semitism today. Since the attack by savage Hamas Islamist terrorists on October 7th in Israel, we have witnessed a disturbing surge in anti-Semitism incidents worldwide. This resurgence of hatred and bigotry and anti-Jewish violence serves as a stark reminder that the lessons of the Holocaust are as relevant and urgent as ever. Anti-Semitism has historically served as a canary in the coal mine, signaling deeper societal fissures and indicating the erosion of fundamental values such as tolerance and human dignity. We must remain vigilant in our condemnation of all forms of anti-Semitism, recognizing that its proliferation often paves the way for the normalization of other forms of bigotry and discrimination. In our communities of Victoria and Vancouver, we have seen reprehensible displays of anti-Semitism with demonstrations fueled by hatred and intolerance. These acts of bigotry not only dishonor the memory of millions who perished in the Holocaust, but also threaten the very fabric of our society. Holocaust denialism is a reprehensible distortion of history and affront to the memory of the millions who perished in the Holocaust. Furthermore, the recent events unfolding on the campus of the University of British Columbia with the anti-Israel protest and encampment have been marred by anti-Semitic rhetoric and behavior. It is deeply troubling to see such intolerance and hostility directed towards members of the Jewish community, and we must unequivocally condemn the anti-Semitism. As the House Leader of the Conservative Party of British Columbia, I stand firm in my commitment to combating anti-Semitism in all of its forms. We must work tirelessly to root out the poisonous ideology from our communities and our campuses, and to build a future where every individual is treated with dignity and respect. On this day of remembrance, let us honor the memory of the victims of the Holocaust by reaffirming our resolve to stand against hatred and intolerance wherever it may arise. Together, let us strive to build a province where the lessons of history guide us towards a future of peace, a future of understanding, and a future of respect. And to those that are survivors of the Holocaust, to those that pay respect and have memory to those of the Holocaust, my personal sympathies and empathies go with you, and I want to thank you for being here. Thank you. And now it is indeed a pleasure and an honor for me to introduce MLA Selina Robinson.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to thank the Holocaust survivors who are here, their descendants. It's certainly a difficult day, I know, for you, and we appreciate you taking the time to be here with us, because it's really important that you are here. Today is Yom Ha'Shoah, a day of remembrance. But why is remembering so important? Why is studying history so important? Government just saw fit to make Holocaust education mandatory. But why is that so important? History reminds us of where we come from and it can serve as a reminder of where we are headed. On the evening of Saturday, April 13th, I sat with a dozen other Canadians in Tel Aviv, waiting for the Iranian rockets to descend on Israel, where half of the world's 16 million Jews live. My cousin and her mother-in-law, Ellen, were also in Israel that week. I visited with them the next morning, and Ellen, an 88-year-old Holocaust survivor, shared with me what that night was like for her. She said, "I was terrified. I slept with my clothes on, with the lights on, and there was no sleep for me that night." And then she said, "Selina, it's happening again." History tells us where we are heading, and right here, right now, Jews all over the world are afraid that it is happening again. And the it is not about gas chambers. It's not about concentration camps. The it is not about tattooed numbers on one's forearm. The it is the silencing of others. The it is the intimidation of others. The it is the isolation of others. The it is the dehumanization of others. The it is the silence of those in positions of power. The it is the silence of the majority. And yes, it is happening again. And it is incumbent on each and every one of us to make sure that we stop it. And that when we say never again, that we know what we're talking about. And that we are taking action, not words, that we are taking action to put an end to it. That's why we study history. That's why we remember.
Thank you. Just before we move on, I know there are a lot of elected officials here today. I want you to just raise your hand because I think it's important that we show everybody how many of our team here at the legislature showed up. Now we're going to light candles in memory of those who were persecuted and murdered during the Holocaust. Rabbi Lynn Greenoff of Kolat Mayim congregation will join us to perform El Mele Rakamim and the Kaddish of the camps, which are a mourner's prayer. Please come to the podium as well as Premier Eby.
Okay, so I think we'll light first. Just
Each candle is lit to represent a community that faced discrimination and violence. Please step forward when I call your name. Okay. Amalia Bo-Fishman, child survivor from the Netherlands, who will share her story with us today. Jan Fishman, who is second-generation descendant of survivors. Ilona Murmelstein, who is a child survivor from Hungary. Leo Vogel, who is a child survivor from the Netherlands. Talia Mastai, who is a descendant of survivors. Noah Faraj, who will light a candle in memory of non-Jewish victims, including members from the Roma, Slavic, and 2S LGBTQI+ communities, as well as people with disabilities. Lisa Abrams, who is a descendant of survivors. Now is my honor, to invite the rabbi back.
I'm going to sing the El Malei Rochamim prayer. It's a prayer for our dead. We recite it traditionally at funerals, at Yizkor, at the memorial service. And it speaks of a God full of compassion. And we plead with God to grant peace to the souls of those who have departed, particularly those who departed before their time. El Malei Rochamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamatzeh Menucha Nechona Al Kanfei HaShechina, B'ma'alot Kedoshim Utorim, Kezohar Rakia, Mazirim et kol hanashamot shel sheshet milyonei hayehudim halalei hashoah be'Europa shenecherku shenishchatu shenishrafu v'shenispu al kiddush Hashem bidei hamrotzchim hagermanim hanatzim v'yozrehem mishar ha'amim Lachen ba'al harochamim yastirem b'seter kenafav li'olamim ve'yitzror b'itzror ha'chayim et nishmotehem Adonai hu nachlatam began Eden techei menuchtam V'yamdu l'noralam l'ketz chayamin v'nomar Amen. Merciful God who dwells above, provide a sure rest upon the divine presence of your wings amongst the holy and the pure, whose shining resembles the sky. All the souls of the 6 million Jews, victims of the European Holocaust, who were murdered, slaughtered, burnt, and exterminated for the sanctification of your name by the German Nazi assassins and their helpers from the rest of the peoples. Therefore, Master of Mercy, you will protect them forever from behind the hiding of your wings, and you will tie their souls with the rope of life. The everlasting is their heritage. Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, shall be their rest, and they shall rest peacefully upon their lying place. They will stand for their fate at the end of days, and we say, Amen. I'd like to ask Annabelle Wynne to come and stand with me for the Kaddish of the camps. And I would like you to ask all of you to rise, please. Okay, so I'll say this and you say. Yitkadal
Auschwitz,
V'yitkadash
Lodz,
Shemei Rabbah
Ponar,
B'yoma divrach Yerutei
Babi Yar,
V'yamlich Malchutei
Majdanek,
B'chayechon Uv'yomechon
Birkenau,
Uv'chayei Dechol Beit Yisrael
Kovno,
Ba'agala Uv'yizman Kariv V'imeru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mavorach Le'olam Olamei Amaya Yitbarach V'yishtabach
Theresienstadt,
V'yitpa'ar V'yitramam
Buchenwald,
V'yitnaseh V'yithadar
Treblinka,
V'yitaleh V'yitalal
Vilna,
Shemei Dekudashah
Bergen-Belsen,
Berichu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata,
Dachau,
tushbachata v'nechamata,
Minsk,
da miran bi'oma
Warsaw,
v'emaru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim tovim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'emaru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, huya se shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'emaru. Amen. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I want to say a few words first. Okay. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you today, Premier Eby, colleagues on all sides of the House, all guests, and in particular, Holocaust survivors, those who are second and third and even fourth generation survivors. I am so very honored to be here today with you. I'd like to say just a few words about distinguishing between facts and truth. I spoke about this yesterday at the Rally for Israel. I find that facts often obfuscate the greater truth that we are seeking. I can only hope and trust that all of us in this room, in this olam of time and space, find a moment of truth. Most of us are familiar with at least some of the facts that permeate the history of the Shoah. We know we can never know all the facts, but we do try to find the truth of how the Shoah happened in those very dark days. As we consider even the stories each one of us holds in our own small lifetime, we cannot begin to reckon the stories lost by the 6 million plus Jews murdered for the very fact of their being a Jew. We know ourselves and each other through our stories, stories of love and grief, of birth and death, of crazy cousins who make us laugh, and touching remembrances of roses sent every year on an anniversary that can no longer be observed. And we mourn with deepest sadness the stories of these endless souls whose lives ended so savagely, a savagery that only precise intention affords. Today, I want us to bring truth into this room. Truth is olam, that conjunction of time and space. Facts are mere furnishings. Truth is what builds our souls, our sense of morality, of justice and duty. Truths are those aphorisms our parents, God willing, taught us. My father of blessed memory taught me this: stand up for what you believe in, even if it means you stand alone. Truth means we can stare into the bleakness of darkness and evil and see light, albeit sometimes the flickering of a small candle, a small flame of hope. Truth means we take a risk, sometimes an enormous risk, with potentially great personal consequence. Truth enables us to distinguish between pathways of evil and pathways of good. Truth knows we must not just take action. Truth knows we're responsible for our actions. Truth can burden us, and it can unburden us. Truth can be shouldered with courage. Truth can mean facing God. When Elie Wiesel was in Auschwitz, a teenager of only 15, he watched 3 rabbinic scholars put God on trial. Where was God? They asked. in the face of such massive suffering? Where was God as good and faithful Jews were murdered in numbers beyond imagination, as numbers were tattooed onto their very bodies? Many think God was found guilty, but Wiesel tells us that rather than guilty, the rabbis found God chayav, in violation of biblical law. God was found liable, obligated, in debt to his people. After the verdict, Wiesel said there was silence. And then the participants sat down to their evening prayers. In such prayer, in such a trial of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we find truth. Historians often demand eyewitness evidence, facts. Yet the truth of this trial has become part of our story of Auschwitz. Did this trial happen in those terrible barracks of death? I trust Wiesel. This story lives because of its truth. And such a trial, I suggest, continues this day. God is on trial right now. Beheaded babies shoved into ovens on October 7th put God on trial again. But more than God, those actions put every single one of us on trial, even as we ask, how can this be? Part of our evolving truth is events like today, where we are together in this commemoration of the Shoah. We're here to look at you, our politicians, our government, our citizens, our friends, and see the truth of who you are and who we are. The facts are in the history books. The truth is in this room. This is ours and your moment of truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Now it's my honor to invite Amalia Bo-Fishman to give our keynote address. Amalia was born in the Netherlands to a secular Jewish family. Despite being integrated into their community, her family was forced into hiding in order to survive the Holocaust. To keep themselves alive, they split apart as a family into different hiding places. As a mother myself, I cannot imagine the choices people like Amalia's family had to make in the face of these atrocities. Please join me in welcoming Amalia to the podium to share her story.
Thank you. I'm not only here as a survivor, but also as an outreach speaker for the classrooms. And if you were a class of students, I would tell you my story as a Holocaust child survivor. I would show you pictures to make it more personal. And if you were a class of students, I would end my presentation by asking, and why do you think I'm sharing my story with you? And now I'm sharing my story with you. I was born in a town called Leeuwarden in the north of the Netherlands. I had a father, a mother, brothers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. My father, Arnold van Kreeveld, was born in Amsterdam. His parents were socialists. The story went, my grandmother walked with the banner on May the 1st, Labor Day. My father was born May the 4th. My grandfather was a photographer, went with his glass slides to many events, telling beautiful stories. My father was an only child, spent much of his time with his many cousins. My mother, Johanna de Leeuw, was born in Arnhem, a religious family. My grandparents and 3 of the 6 children made Aliyah to Israel in the early 30s. My mother became a nurse, working in a Jewish hospital in Amsterdam. My father had a motorcycle accident, ended up in the Jewish hospital, met my mom, the nurse, fell in love, and he married in 1935. My brother David, nicknamed Dick, was born 1937. They all moved to Leeuwarden. And I, Amalia Paulina, nicknamed Ameline, arrived August the 23rd, 1939. We had a good life, the family, friends, and neighbors. And then in May 1940, the German army invaded the Netherlands. I didn't know there was going to be a war. I was not 1 year old. Hitler and his Nazi party made many discriminating rules against the Jews. Every Jew and non-Jew filled in a form explaining how many Jewish or non-Jewish parents and grandparents each had. Schools had to put up an Aryan declaration to separate Jews from the non-Jews. Jews were forced to wear a yellow star, and then children were not allowed to go to school. My father, at night, would go to a Jewish home where high school children gathered, teaching the students English and math. The parents of my father's side lived in Utrecht, but were forced to move to Amsterdam, into a Jewish neighborhood, easy to round them up. That happened June the 25th, 1942. My grandparents, My grandparents were rounded up August the 12th, 1942, sent to Westerbork, the transit camp of the Netherlands. September the 4th, 1942, by train to Auschwitz. Murdered in the gas chambers, September the 7th, 1942. I never got to know my grandparents. My father received a call-up notice in the spring of 1942. That meant he would have to go to a central location in Leeuwarden. At that time, he was working as a scientist in a research laboratorium in Leeuwarden. Jan Spiekhout, you will hear the name Jan a lot. Jan Spiekhout, a research assistant of my father, was also a member of the Dutch resistance. Jan found immediately an address for my father to go in hiding. He then found a different hiding address for my mother, and another address for my brother, and then one for myself. So difficult for my parents to send us away and possibly never see us again. My mother gave me a special doll to keep me company, a letter I brought with me so my new family would understand her little girl somewhat better. Ending the letter, telling how fond I was of my older brother Dick. If my parents would not survive the war, Holocaust, to send us together to Israel to stay with one of my mother's sisters. Then Jan Spiekhout took me on the back of his bike to his parents' house. There were 6 children in the Spiekhout family. Jan was the eldest. They became my family. Father Spiekhout took a great risk bringing me into his household. After all, he was a policeman. Policemen were supposed to work for the Nazis and round up the Jews. The children in the family were told that I was the daughter of a sick aunt in Rotterdam. If I was scared, I can't remember. We were now separated from each other. My father, typical Jewish-looking, dark hair and short for Friesland, Friesland, province in the north, where the people are generally blonde, tall, and fled from hiding place to hiding place. At least 26 different addresses, all at night and all arranged by Jan Spiekhout. My mother, not so typical Jewish looking, did not need to flee so often. She told me later to keep her mind occupied, knitted socks and socks for the families who sheltered her. My brother Dick first arrived at a small farm where he was mistreated. He was only 5 years old. Again, Jan Spiekhout found a farm with friendly people, fair and typical Jewish looking. He walked He walked freely around the farmer's land. And as for myself, not 3 years old, I don't know what I remember or what I've been told later on. The family was Dutch Reformed Christian, quite religious. We prayed before the meal, read a passage out of the Bible, give thanks after the meal. I slept in the bed with the 2 teenage daughters, told to hide inside a storage area behind the bed if and when Nazis came knocking on the door. Mostly those 3 years, I stayed with the Spiekhout. However, one time a co-worker of Jan Spiekhout and my father knocked on the door, spotted me and recognized me, saying, "That's Van Kreveld's little girl." I was sent to another hiding place for some time. And in February 1944, the war was supposed to be finished, but it wasn't. The last winter of the war was the Hungary War. If we had enough to eat, I can't remember. In the west of the Netherlands, they ate tulip bulbs to satisfy their hunger. And then, April the 15th, the Canadian soldiers liberated Leeuwarden. And all of a sudden, I saw here a monument outside, and I want to ask you, the monument with the wreath, was that for the Canadian soldiers who fought in the Netherlands? Because May the 4th is is Remembrance Day in the Netherlands. And on the 5th is Liberation Day. And at those days, the Canadians always, every year, everywhere, the soldiers, or now the veterans, are applauded and walking in an how do I say that? Of course, I get tongue-tied when I don't write my notes. Okay, so anyhow, they are always being honored, as you can imagine. So the Canadian soldiers liberated Leeuwarden, but sadly, 7,600 Canadian soldiers died liberating the Netherlands. I don't know if everybody knows this. I was allowed to go outside. I remember that day so well. I was outdoors and felt strange and frightened outside and so close to so many strangers. The Canadian soldiers came rolling in. Their tanks handed out chocolates. Everybody was smiling, dancing, and waving Dutch flags, which they did yesterday again on Liberation Day in the Netherlands. Then I was told I could go home to my real family. But who were those strangers? I did not want to leave the family Spiekhout. They were my family, and I had not seen my real family in 3 years. My own parents, who survived the war, tried to get acquainted with me. They told me about my big brother, Dick, and about my baby brother, Jan, who was born November the 11th, 1944. And then I went home to my family. We were the lucky ones. My parents survived the war. My brother Dick survived the war. And I had now a baby brother, Jan. From the 140,000 Jews from the Netherlands before the war, only 38,000 survived, less than 10%. And why? Because being a Jew. My father's parents were murdered in Auschwitz. So many of his extended family. One of his co-workers, the Katz family, decided to commit suicide rather than being captured by the Nazis. My mother's beloved sister and husband murdered in Auschwitz. Their 3 sons survived the war, sent to Israel to stay with the family. Not able to return to the same house as before 1942, we were assigned a house to a house of collaborators, Dutch Nazi collaborators. Those Dutch collaborators were sent to the camp of Westerbork, ironically, which was once the transit camp of the Jews. My mother looked around in the neighborhood, looking to find some little children for me. After all, for 3 years I had been indoors and had nobody to play with. My mother hoped I would learn to play as a young child. My brother Dick, now 8 years old, I didn't remember him. My father, I was afraid of him. I called him he or him while pointing at him. My baby brother Jan, he was my comfort. My baby brother Jan was called after Jan Speak Out, of course. Turning 6, my first experience with school. Not used to be with a group of children, I now was surrounded by 60 students in my grade 1 class. That was very, very difficult. I did not like it. But bit by bit, slowly, we all began to adjust. I spent a great deal of my time with my foster family. Father Speak Out always called me his little girl. They were and remain always my other family. Years later, I asked Mother Speak Out, still call them father and mother in the Frisian way. I asked her, why did you hide me in your home? She told me it was my Christian duty, but I know they really loved me as well. Life with my real family became more normal. We moved to a new neighborhood. I was enrolled in a new school and made friends. Later on, I became a kindergarten teacher. This became my life's work. Taught in the Netherlands, worked a year in anthroposophical school in England. When I was 21 years old, I decided to go to Israel, looking for my roots, and visited with my family of my mother's side, who made Aliyah before the war. I was enrolled in an Ulpan program in Kibbutz Hashita, where I met a Canadian man called Mordechai Fishman, fell in love, decided to marry, and we moved to Canada. He was a Canadian. Luckily to Vancouver. 60 years later, oh, sorry, I forgot something. I forgot to tell you that we married, and then 3 sons arrived, and I got my son Jan Fishman here with me. And then Paula arrived, and Ben arrived. So I'm the lucky, I was the lucky mom of three sons. And many grandchildren now, and great-grandchildren. 60 years after the liberation of the Netherlands, Jan Speak Out and his parents Dirk and Frauke were not alive anymore. It became important that Jan and his parents should be recognized for their courage. Jan Speak Out saved my father, mother, brother, myself, and many other Jews during the Holocaust. Dirk and Frauke, father and mother Speak Out, sheltered me with great risk for them and for their family. I approached Yad Vashem telling my story. Yad Vashem did the research, decided that Jan, Dirk, and Frauke Speak Out should be recognized. They were for recognition. They were so well deserved. I traveled with my 3 sons for the presentation ceremony in Den Haag. And so, on November the 25th, 2009, The 3 speakouts were honored with a collective medal and a certificate. All their names are inscribed in Yad Vashem's honor wall in the garden of the righteous among the nations. To be together with my children, my brother, Jan, the children and the grandchildren of the Speak Out family. This was such a movie day. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amalia, for sharing that story and for joining us here with your son. Now it's my pleasure to invite Annabelle Wind and Darcy Phillips to perform a closing song.
כשאמות משהו ממני, משהו ממני ימות בך, ימות בך כשתמות, משהו ממך בי, משהו ממך בי ימות איתך, ימות איתך, כי כולנו, כן כולנו, כולנו רקמה אנושית אחת חיה, ואם אחד מאיתנו הולך מימנו, משהו מת בנו ומשהו נשאר איתו. אם נדע איך להרגיע, איך להרגיע את האיבה, אם רק נדע, אם נדע, אם נדע להשקיט את עלבוננו, על אף עלבוננו לומר סליחה, אם נדע להתחיל מההתחלה, כי כולנו, כן כולנו, כולנו רקמה אנושית אחת חיה, ואם אחד מאיתנו הולך מימנו, משהו מת בנו ומשהו נשאר איתו, נשאר איתו רקמה אנושית, נשאר איתו.
So that concludes our ceremony today. I just want to thank you all for gathering and being here with all of us at the legislature. Very important. I'd like to invite you all to join us for lunch. It will be just in the lower rotunda, and we look forward to. I want to also thank my colleague, Speaker Raj Chauhan, for allowing us and hosting this luncheon here today. There he is back there. Thank you, everyone.